All right, folks, all right. Come on in and find a seat. Find a seat, if you can find one. Hi, baby. Casey, can you break up that band of hooligans at the back there? Look at those guys. All right, everyone. Well, come on in. Welcome. Good to be back with you. Good to see you all here. And, let's talk a little bit about the Proverbs. But before we do, Andy, would you be willing to pray for us? Open us up. I'd be grateful to you. Amen. Thank you, Andy. Well, welcome back. We continue our series in the wisdom literature, and I'm excited. We've got a series of talks coming up that I'm really excited about, which I'll introduce here in a moment. Before we do that, though, we need to, can we stretch all the way back to when we started this series up? Got towards the end of the summer, I guess. Time flies. And there is an idea that is central to the book of Proverbs, and it is, we translate it into English as the word wisdom. But this word in Hebrew is the word Hokma. Hokma. And what it means is that, that there is a way to the world. There is if I can put it this way, there is a logic that is built into creation. And to live with Hokma, to live with wisdom, is to go with the grain of how God has designed the world. And to live foolishly is to go against the grain, right? And heaven knows we all have plenty of experience trying to go against the grain. And when you go against the grain, things typically don't go that well. Now, we need to qualify here that in the biblical worldview, this is not karma or anything like this. It's not you do a good deed and something good happens to you. It is more like God has created the world to operate by his wisdom. And so when we act in ways that are consistent with God's wisdom, things typically go better. When we act in ways that are inconsistent with God's wisdom, things typically go worse. So to live with wisdom, to live life with skill, if I can put it like this, is to go with the grain rather than trying to go against it. And we've been talking about what this looks like across all kinds of different fields. Most recently, we've been talking about how do you live with Hokma when it comes to managing your money, thinking about wealth. How do you go with the grain of God's purposes, not against them? And we're going to switch gears over the next few weeks to talk about examples of living by Hokma taken from the natural world. If you read the Proverbs, you'll notice that there are lots and lots of parables and metaphors drawn from the world of nature, and that shouldn't surprise us. Because Solomon's trying to tell us, listen, the world itself is full of God's Hokma. It's the place where God's wisdom is on display. And to learn to live skillfully in God's world, we have a lot to learn by watching the natural world itself. It is said of Solomon in 1 Kings 4, and maybe we've missed this. It feels like a throwaway line, but it's not. It's said of him, and I'm quoting 1 Kings here. Solomon spoke of trees, from the cedar that is in Lebanon to the hyssop that grows out of the wall. He also spoke of beasts and of birds and of reptiles and of fish. I hadn't thought much about that line until I really started to study the book of Proverbs for this study. I just thought it was a way of saying, Solomon had a lot of interests. He liked to talk about animals and trees and stuff. And that's part of it, but actually, in the context in 1 Kings 4, we're being told precisely why Solomon was considered so wise, and part of his wisdom was that he was a keen observer of the natural world. which makes me feel embarrassed because I made fun of my dad for this morning, but it's also true of me. I don't like to go outside. I'm married into an outdoorsy family. I go camping so that I can stay married. I don't like it. And I go out there and you go with someone who really knows the outdoors, like some of you in this room. There's a real wisdom there that I just don't have, right? You drop me off in the wilderness, I will die in 20 minutes. And I might die of despair sooner than that. But there are people in the world who really know how the natural world works, and there's a wisdom in that Solomon's trying to tell us through these Proverbs. And so what we're going to do over the next several weeks is we're going to look at a series of animal parables in the book of Proverbs. Because Solomon seems to think that humans can learn how to live with skill by watching animals. And we're going to meditate on why that is, and we're going to look at one of these parables this morning. We're going to look at the parable of the ant in Proverbs 6. But before we do, I want you to turn, if you've got your Bible, to Proverbs chapter 30. And this is where we're going to start this morning. I'll have some questions for you. Proverbs chapter 30, verses 24 through 25. Actually, let me just read the whole section, starting at verse 24. 4 things on earth are small, but they are exceedingly wise. The ants are a people not strong, yet they provide their food in the summer. And the rock badgers are a people not mighty, yet they make their homes in the cliffs. And the locusts have no king, yet all of them march in rank. The lizard you can take in your hands, yet it is in kings' palaces. 3 things are stately in their tread, 4 are stately in their stride. The lion, which is mightiest among the beasts and does not turn back before any. The strutting rooster, the he-goat, and a king whose army is with them. Okay, we're not going to look at all these parables, but I want to read this passage to introduce something. Solomon says that animals are wise. Now, wisdom is normally a characteristic that we would only attribute to human beings, I think. That would be our default mode. Only a human can be wise, but Solomon says that animals are wise. What do you think he means by this? In what ways are animals wise? Yeah, they sure know a lot more about nature than we do, Luke says. That's true. I mean, we already established that I would die in 20 minutes. If you drop my dog off in the middle of the wilderness, she would be thrilled. That would be like her best life. She's probably hoping that we do that. And I'm also hoping that we do that. Yeah, Randy.
There are certain built-in instinctive behaviors that ensure their survival.
Yeah, okay, really good. They have instinctive behaviors built in that ensure their survival. We showed Kit a video. She was watching a nature show with her grandfather yesterday, and it was of a horse being born. Have you ever seen footage of a horse being born? It seems very hard to birth a human child. A mother horse, man, special prize for them. But a baby horse can walk from day one, right? A theologian by the name of Jürgen Moltmann, a German theologian, has said that in many ways, human beings are the least impressive species physically. When we're born as children, we can do exactly 3 things. We can sleep, eat, and we can poop. That's all. Those are the 3 skills that we come with. And it takes years for us to even be able to do anything else at a rudimentary level. But animals are born more or less, depending on the species and the kind of animal, ready for the world. And this is partially because they have instincts that we don't have. How else might we talk about an animal being wise? Sure. Animals have a tremendous amount of intelligence of a peculiar kind. They don't sit around and do math equations, but they've got a way of being in the world. Yeah. Morgan, go ahead. Oh, yeah. There's a story in Numbers about Balaam the donkey who who can see spiritual things while his rider, who's supposed to be a prophet, can't see anything. Yeah, that's right. It's a great story. Balaam's donkey. I had a professor who said that story gives him great hope that even the word of the Lord can be spoken by a donkey, and if he could do it once, he could do it again. He'd said that at the beginning of class. Yeah, Randy.
Well, animals instinctively exhibit community.
Yeah.
Because they act in a way that benefits all.
Yeah. Oh, really good, Randy. Animals are. Yeah, that's right. With a few exceptions, some animals are loners, but almost all of them are communal by nature. Human beings are too. We just forget it sometimes. Animals are wise because they do things by instinct that we have to learn to do by habit. I think that's part of what Solomon means here. You watch an animal, it knows what to do instinctively. We often don't know what to do. We have to learn. Job, in chapter 12, God says to Job, ask the beasts and they will teach you. A great line. Ask the beasts and they will teach you. The birds of heaven and they will tell you. And of course, this is a feature of Jesus' teaching, right? He uses animal parables quite a lot. The Bible originates in a world where people are much more in touch with nature than we are. So we've got some learning to do. Now, can you think of any examples of practical wisdom of animals? So we've talked kind of abstractly about the wisdom of animals. What does this actually look like? I'll get us started with one. Birds fly south for the winter. Nobody tells them to, right? They didn't commission a committee to do a study of the different climates and then determine at a certain point in the late fall we should all move south. They just do it. Well, was that Rich? Except for the Canadian geese, which are never going anywhere ever. Yeah, who live here forever now. Any other examples of practical wisdom of animals? Hibernation's a good example, right? And that's a pretty good idea. I'd be in favor of human hibernation. Say about November, just go to sleep, emerge in May. What's that? Or 1 o'clock in the afternoon. What else?
Finding a partner in mating.
Absolutely, finding a partner in mating. Yep. Animals don't need dating apps, right? They figure it out. They know how to do it instinctively. Any other examples?
Well, in raising dogs, the mother dog knows exactly what to do when the puppy's done, clean them up and get them going.
Yep. There's no manual. We had Kid a couple years ago. There is nothing but manuals. And still you have no idea what you're doing, right? They just send you home from the hospital. Keep this thing alive. Yeah, we've established I'm not a dog person. I have a dog. Adrian has a dog, and I live in the same house as Adrian, is probably how I'd put it. But I will give dogs this. When you're not feeling well, your dog knows. When you're sad about something, your dog knows. When you are feeling down, there's even stories that dogs can tell when someone is very sick before they can. Dogs can detect cancer sometimes. Incredible intuitive wisdom. And Solomon says, all those animals do that by instinct, but we have got to cultivate those sorts of things. And one of the ways we do it is by watching animals. And so we're going to be in Proverbs chapter 6. This is the parable of the ant. That's where we're going to be camping out for the rest of our time here. Just recently, Kit discovered an ant colony in our sidewalk out in front of our townhome. It had built a home in the sidewalk. And let me tell you, Kit was transfixed looking at these ants. It was like giving her a smartphone, which we try not to. Yeah, our grandparents give her their phones. And it was like she had an iPhone, but she was on her stomach looking at these ants. We couldn't pull her away. We had to go somewhere, and she was crying. She wanted to watch the ants. And we were explaining to them these are called ants. And now every morning, when it's dark still, that's changing with daylight savings, but every morning, first thing she pops up and goes, ants, ants. Like, well, we can't go look at the ants right now. It's 5 in the morning. And she wants to look at the ants. Ants are incredible creatures. Solomon's going to have us draw a bunch of spiritual lessons by looking at ants. And like Kit, we need to learn to consider the ant. Solomon tells us we need to consider the ant because we don't think about ants very much. Once we get past a certain age, we think of them maybe as a nuisance, as damaging wood in our houses or something like this. But Solomon seems to think that there is a nobility and a deep spiritual wisdom about ants that we can learn from. They're a natural marvel. So let's read this proverb. I'll read it for us, and then we are going to just, for the rest of our time together, we are just going to try to think about how we can learn from ants. We're going to try to unravel the riddle together, because remember, the Proverbs are not didactic literature in the sense that it's not like reading Ephesians or Galatians where Paul just tells you what you should do. These are riddles that we need to figure out. So let's read it. This is Proverbs chapter 6. And we'll read verse 6 through 11. And Solomon is commending the ant to the sluggard. We've talked a little bit about work and industry in this series. And we talked about the sluggard saying that there's a lion in the streets. I can't get up and go to work because the lion's out there. It might kill me. This is the same character, the sluggard, who can't be bothered to do anything. Listen to what Solomon says. Go to the ant, you sluggard. Consider her ways and be wise. There's that word again. You can learn to live life with skill by looking at the ant. Without having any chief officer or ruler, she prepares her bread in summer and gathers her food in harvest. How long are you going to lie there, O sluggard? When are you going to wake up from your sleep? When are you going to get out of bed? A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, and poverty will come upon you like a robber, and want like an armed man. All right. I learned a lot about ants this week as I was preparing and researching and thinking about this. And I came across, what is a scientist who studies ants called, or insects? Does anybody? What is it? Entomologist. All right, that's a word I don't know. Entomologist. Okay. I was reading an entomologist talking about ants. And she made the point that ants are the most successful life form on the planet. And she said this is true for a number of reasons. If you judge it in terms of abundance, apparently there are more ants than there are any other creature. That seems right, I guess. I'll take her word for it. Social complexity. She says nobody has ants beaten. And survival. Right? Ants can survive just about anywhere, and they've survived for a really, really long time. So she says even in some ways they are more impressive than humans. And they are super powerful. And Solomon is commending the ant as a model for a human life. I thought of 6 or 7 ways that this is true, but I want to see if we can unravel this together. So I'll just throw it out there. I'll just open it up. What specific lessons does Solomon think we can take from watching ants? Oh, discipline. All right, say more about that.
Well, they all have their purpose
Mm-hmm.
in their structure, and they follow that purpose on a regular basis, and that's what keeps them the success they have.
Okay, good. Yeah, so Mike makes the point that ants are incredibly disciplined because every ant has a role in the colony that they are to fulfill, and this is what makes them so successful, so abundant, and so able to survive. So they're extremely disciplined creatures. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of the key lessons Solomon wants us to take. What else? They bear each other's burdens. Yeah. Have you ever seen, you ever been at a picnic and ants are taking a watermelon away? Or or there, I don't know. There's a scene in The fourth Indiana Jones, the Crystal Skull one, that one wasn't as good, but maybe you saw it. There's a scene where the bad guy gets carried away and devoured by killer ants in Africa. Like the most horrifying scene I can imagine. I did some reading on this week. Does anyone have a guess as to how many times its own body weight an ant can lift?
40.
Good guess, but no. Not 100.
2 million.
We overshot it a little bit. It's 5,000. I read this in the Journal of Biomechanics this week, that ants can carry 5,000 times their body weight. That's not that much, still. That's like a crumb, but still. And when they band together, to Jesse's point, they can bear tremendous weight. So even one ant by itself can lift a lot, they can endure a lot, but when they band together, and apparently, after I watched the Indiana Jones movie, I read about this too, ants can actually do that, which is so horrifying, I had to just close my laptop. I couldn't read about it anymore. Like ants could carry you off and bring you down into their colony. No, thank you. So they are, we might say they maximize their natural ability. Not much is expected of an ant. By themselves, you might not think much of an ant, but actually proportionally, they're tremendously strong, and they're even stronger together. So 2 key lessons. They're super disciplined. They are incredibly strong, right? What else? There's a bunch we can learn from ants. Yeah, go ahead, Andy.
When I observe ants,
They're always moving. Yeah, that's right. So Andy makes the point, ants are always moving. Which is the opposite of the sluggard. Now, here's the problem. The American culture is frantic already. So I don't think that we necessarily should take the lesson that we should always be moving. But Solomon is holding them up as a paragon of industry. He says, how long are you going to lay in your bed, you sluggard? Look at the ants. They've been working for hours. You've been sleeping here, right? They're always moving. They're always doing something. Now, God has designed us and the world as such that there are natural rhythms of work and rest. This is why the Sabbath is so important, that we take time to pause from our work. But when it's time to work, it's time to work, right? This is one of the lessons we can take from ants. My doctoral supervisor, and this is not fair because she's German, and so they're industrious by nature. I mean, always a task that can be done no matter how much time you have in your workday. And that was really good advice for me as I was writing my dissertation, because